Good morning, Willowbrook. Today we are in Matthew chapter 21, verses 12 through 22. Now, the triumphal entry has already happened, and Jesus is going into the temple. And when he walks into the temple, he sees the money changers. And we see Jesus's righteous indignation. We see a show of anger from him because this is supposed to be a place of praise and a place of glory to God. And instead, the religious leaders had made it corrupt. They'd made it corrupt in two ways. Anybody over the age of 19, they had to pay a tax to get into the temple. Now, that's wrong. You don't have to pay to get into the church. Yes, you want to give of tithes, you want to give of offerings, but back then they had to have a tax. But they just didn't have to pay a tax. They had to use the priest's money. So they had to exchange their money, and there was an exorbitant amount charged for them to change their money. And then they had to have a suitable sacrifice, and many people brought their own. But their sacrifice had to be inspected by, again, the priest and the leadership, and surprise, surprise, it was never acceptable. And so then they had to buy acceptable animals, doves and things to sacrifice, and they were charged an exorbitant amount. So they were being ripped off in those two areas just to come. So Jesus overturns the tables and he drives everyone out. And then we see anger followed by love, because his anger was genuine, and we'll get into that in a second. And then he had love because the lame and the blind were coming to him in the temple, and he began to heal them. And the children started crying out, "Hosanna to the Son of David." And they were like, "Do you hear what they're saying?" And he's saying, haven't you heard out of the mouths of babes? You see, the children saw the Messiah, and the religious leaders only saw a way that was hurting their greed and their money, their material things. And they were caught in their sin, and they were caught in the hypocrisy of their religion. But notice, the religious leaders never questioned Jesus's messianic title, the turning over of the corruption in the church. They questioned his healing. They questioned those kinds of things, and they questioned the children coming to them saying, "Hosanna, the Son of David." And so he leaves and he goes out to Bethany. And when he's on his way to Bethany, the next morning to go back to the temple, coming out of it, he finds himself seeing a fig tree. We see another display, some people would say, of anger. Now, it's worth noting that anger is an emotion given to us by God. It's not a bad thing. The problem is how you use it or misuse it. And many times, most of us misuse our anger in a very horrible, very bad way if we are not careful. Then we use the wrong words, we use the wrong emotions, we use the wrong everything when we have it. Benjamin Franklin once said, "Anger is never without a reason, but seldom a good reason." Many of us get confused about Jesus being angry, and yet he's showing the fact that his anger, that emotion, can be an emotion that is completely controlled and used to be corrective. So he finds a fig tree. Now, fig trees were very common in Israel. They were all over the nation of Israel. They were even a symbol of the nation of Israel in the older days. And fig trees were different than other trees because they produced their fruit and then they would produce their leaves. So the fact that this tree had leaves suggests that Jesus very easily thought he could find fruit that was there. It wasn't the fig tree season. That had already passed, the fruit season. But he thought, okay, I'll either find some that were left over from the harvesters, or I will find immature figs still on the trees, and those immature figs were very edible. But so Jesus comes and he takes these two stories that are completely linked together, the cleansing of the temple and the cursing of the fig tree, and he uses them as visual illustrations, as a figurative act, showing us the spiritual condition of the nation of Israel. You see, the nation of Israel was outwardly fruitful, but inwardly they were very corrupt. And through the Old Testament, you see Israel and a fig tree, Israel represented. And you think that a healthy tree, like a healthy apple tree produces apples, a healthy plum tree produces plums, a healthy fig tree produces figs. And so it's a testament to the health of the tree. And so, but Jesus is saying, this tree what doesn't produce. So it has no real value. It has no purpose. It is all for show. And that's the nation of Israel. They had the temple, they had the priests, they had the garments the priest wore, they had their ceremonies, they had all of their feasts, and it was beautiful to see from the outside, but the inside had no genuine life. So the religion was barren, it was spiritually corrupt, it was dead, it was fruitless. And then Jesus comes along and he talks about the fact that, he says in verses 20 and 21, if you have faith and you don't doubt, not only can you do what was done to that fig tree when I cursed it and it withered away, but you can also say to a mountain, go throw yourself into the sea and it will be done. If you believe, you'll receive whatever you ask in prayer. Now, I don't believe that Jesus expects us to be able to physically move a mountain. That was never done in the Bible, in the New Testament, and Jesus didn't even do it. The lesson is to have faith and no doubt. We have to constantly be trusting in God and live in an attitude of dependence upon Him. The temple and the religious leaders, there was no genuine faith. There was no life dependent upon God. The leaders of the church, they had their ceremonies, they had their show of faith. And it appeared to be deep. It appeared to be meaningful. It had lots of leaves, but deep down it was completely fruitless. They were living a life without God. They were living a life on its own. And so Jesus comes and he looks at us and he says, hey, I want you to keep it real. I want you to be real with me in your emotions, in your physical, in everything you have. I want you to be real with me, but I want your faith and dependence in me to be just as real. Have an inward reality in your life that people can see and know that it is absolutely real. If you have faith and you pray, to Jesus moving a mountain in the writings of the Old Testament, a mountain was a big-sized problem. It was something that no one could do without help. And Jesus says, if you have dependence on me, then that mountain-sized problem can be moved, but you have to depend on me. Do you have a problem in your life? Do you have a struggle that's going on? Do you have something that seems to be that you cannot move it? Bring God into it. You're not taking God and bringing him into your will. You're wanting to take your will and align it with God's will. So bring God into your problem. Pray, believe, show the reality of your faith. Get everything out of your heart that needs to be cleansed, that's corrupt, and trust in God. And if you'll do that, God says, your faith, not only will your religion be free, not only will your relationship with me be real, but those problems can be moved. You can see victory. You want to see victory in your life? I sure do. Find it in Jesus. Cleanse, confess, be real, be whole, believe, have faith, and God will move your mountain.